The pale twin suns hung low over the shattered plains of Vireth, casting long, flickering shadows across the broken husks of once mighty cities. A bitter wind, sharp and unyielding, swept through the ruins, carrying with it the acrid scent of burning ozone and scorched metal. The sky was a bruised canvas of swirling crimson and ash-gray clouds, pierced occasionally by the sharp glint of distant warships looming like vultures in the heavens above. Amidst the desolation, the air hummed with a low, persistent vibration, an echo of the relentless war machines still patrolling the surface, hunting the last remnants of a civilization on the brink of extinction. Kytharian stood at the edge of a collapsed observation platform, his many faceted eyes reflecting the devastation that stretched endlessly before him. The weight of command pressed heavily on his slender frame, yet his posture remained rigid, disciplined. His compound eyes absorbed every detail, the smoldering craters where entire districts had been reduced to cinders, the shattered skeletal remains of towering spires that once housed the Kytharian council, and the faint shimmering outlines of cloaked skimmers darting silently between ruins. The once vibrant world of Vireth was now a graveyard, its pulse almost extinguished. A soft hiss from the communicator embedded in his wrist broke his reverie. It was Swirling, the lead scientist and his closest confidant. Swirling's voice, usually precise and measured, carried a thread of desperation today. "Commander, our scans confirm the Warlord fleet has deployed the new phase disruptors. Our defensive grids are faltering. We cannot hold much longer." Kytharian's mandibles twitched, a signal of his mounting frustration. The Kytharian species had thrived for millennia, weaving a tapestry of peace and knowledge across their world and countless others. Yet now, under the iron fist of the Warlords, their culture was being torn asunder. The Warlords, brutal, power-mad descendants of a fractured past, had turned their own homeworld against its people, chasing dominion through fire and blood. The council was wrong, Kytharian murmured to himself, voice barely audible over the howling wind. They believed in diplomacy, alliances, treaties. And yet, when the Warlords rose, every ally turned their gaze away, condemned us to annihilation. His thoughts turned bitter as memories flickered across his mind, messages from neighboring empires, each politely declining to intervene. The ominous silence from the Galactic Assembly. The cold, distant broadcasts from the ancient archives offering no hope but history. The Kytharian people had stood alone in the face of annihilation. Kytharian's gaze shifted skyward, to the faint blue beacon pulsating from the battered communications array nearby. It was their last hope. A broadcast beacon designed to pierce the void, reaching out to unknown species across the cosmos. If no one will aid us, he thought, then we must seek help elsewhere. From the stars unknown, he strode toward the array, his footsteps stirring dust and fragments of shattered glass. The cold metal of the console was slick beneath his clawed fingers as he initiated the transmission sequence. The array thrummed to life, sending a cascade of encrypted signals into the dark expanse beyond their solar system. The sound was a low, harmonious hum, resonating with an eerie, unnatural cadence. The message was complex, layered with Kytharian history, pleas for aid, and encrypted tactical data about the Warlords' fleet. As the signal stretched outward, Kytharian felt the weight of a species' desperation carried on invisible waves across the void. Around him, the world seemed to hold its breath. In the command chamber beneath the ruins, Swirling stood amid flickering holo screens displaying tactical maps and energy readings. The scientist's multiple eyes darted nervously between the data streams, calculating probabilities, searching for a sliver of hope. The Warlords' next assault will hit within hours, Swirling said, voice trembling slightly. Our forces are too few, too fragmented. Without reinforcements, we will be overrun. Kytharian pressed a clawed hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. a fragile pulse against the growing storm. We have sent our plea into the unknown. If there is any who can hear us, any who will answer, it must be now. Time was slipping away like grains of sand through a fractured hourglass. The warlords were relentless, their machines carving a path of destruction through the once proud Kytharian legions. The metallic clang of distant artillery fire echoed faintly, a grim reminder of the battle to come. Outside, the wind carried a distant, mournful howl, perhaps the cries of survivors or the lament of a dying world. Kythar closed his eyes briefly, letting the sound wash over him. Theirs was a culture of peace, shattered by the madness of warlords. Yet in this darkest hour, a flicker of hope remained. Hope that beyond the stars, somewhere, someone might listen. He opened his eyes to the dimming horizon. The twin suns were setting now, their light bleeding away beneath the storm clouds gathering in the east. The first stars began to pierce the gloom, cold and distant. May the cosmos remember the Kytharians, Kythar whispered. And may our call for help find ears that will answer. As the transmission continued, the final rays of sunlight vanished, leaving the world cloaked in twilight and shadow. The Warlords' war was not just a battle for a planet, but a crucible that would test the very soul of a species, and perhaps the fate of all who dwelled among the stars. Far beyond Vireth, in the silent reaches of unknown space, the encrypted plea for aid raced at the speed of light, carrying with it the last hope of a dying world. And somewhere, in the vast expanse, the seeds of humanity stirred in response. The cold hum of the command center settled around Kythar like a shroud, each low vibration resonating through the reinforced bulkheads of the warship Velzorath. The dim red emergency lights cast long, jagged shadows across the room, bending the angular faces of the Kytharian officers into grotesque masks of desperation. Outside the thick viewport, the void stretched infinitely, a black canvas dotted with distant pinpricks of stars that seemed indifferent to the dying cries of entire worlds. Kythar stood rigid, his multi-jointed limbs motionless except for the minute twitch of his mandibles, which betrayed his inner turmoil. His exoskeleton, usually a gleaming blue-black, was dulled with dust and scorch marks from the latest engagement on Viridian Prime. The acrid scent of burnt ozone and molten metal lingered in the recycled air, mixing with the faint metallic tang of spilled coolant. All around him, the remnants of his command staff moved with a quiet urgency, but he remained rooted, an island of stillness amid the chaos. Thexolin, the lead scientist, shuffled forward, clutching a datapad whose screen flickered with streaming images of enemy positions and casualty reports. His compound eyes blinked rapidly, reflecting the frantic glow of the data as he spoke without ceremony. Commander Kythar, the humans. They are unlike any we expected. Their resilience is beyond all precedent. Kythar nodded, though his mandibles clicked with skepticism. We anticipated hostility, yes. But their capacity to endure is exceptional. Thexolin's mandibles quivered, a subtle sign of his agitation. It is not merely endurance. They adapt in real time, learning from each encounter with a speed that defies prediction. Our tactical algorithms fail to account for their improvisations. Their weapons, primitive in design, are wielded with a ferocity and precision that shatters our formations. The commander turned his gaze outward, focusing on the battered, holographic map hovering above the command table. Red blips marked the Kytharian forces, dwindling in number, while larger, more erratic green pulses signified human troop movements. Unlike the disciplined, methodical advance of Kytharian warbands, the human forces moved unpredictably, striking and withdrawing, exploiting terrain that would have been inhospitable, and rallying with tenacity born of desperation. Kythar's thoughts spiraled back to the first encounter. They had expected swift dominance. Decades of conflict with lesser species had honed their martial prowess. The Kytharian warlords wielded power like a blade, slicing through opposition with cold efficiency. But the humans, they fought with something else. A raw iron, blooded resilience that made every victory costly. He could still taste the acrid smoke of the battlefield, feel the vibration of heavy boots pounding against cracked earth, hear the distant echoes of gunfire mingling with the screams of the dying. The humans moved steadily through the canyon of Viridian Prime's northern wastes, their faces smeared with soot and sweat, eyes burning with defiant rage. One particular image haunted him, a human soldier, brandishing a battered rifle, standing alone against a squad of Kytharian shock troops. The soldier's chest heaved with exhaustion, his uniform torn and stained, yet he held his ground, firing round after round until his weapon was empty. When the Kytharian warlords closed in, expecting an easy kill, the soldier threw a grenade, blinding, deafening, and vanished into the smoke. The assault faltered, and the humans pressed forward. It was this unyielding spirit, this refusal to surrender, that unnerved Kryvar most. Inside the Velzorath, the air grew heavier as Thexolan continued, his voice lowering to a grim whisper. They do not seek glory or conquest as we do. Their battles are driven by survival, by an instinct to protect what little remains. Their commanders, there is one they call Maria Chen, exemplifies this. Reports indicate her presence on the front lines, rallying her men with words that ignite courage. Kryvar clenched his claws, feeling the rough edges of his armor dig into his palms. The Kytharian warlords prided themselves on honor and discipline, yet here was an enemy whose will defied reason and expectation. The tactical grid was failing, their methods obsolete against this human stubbornness. He glanced back to the viewport. The stars blinked cold and distant. For a moment, the warship seemed fragile, adrift in an ocean of darkness where the slightest misstep meant oblivion. Suddenly, the comm system crackled, breaking the tense stillness. A voice, harsh, clipped, unmistakably human, filtered through the static. "This is Sergeant Brandon Webb, Frontline Sector Delta 9. Enemy suppressive fire heavy, requesting immediate extraction or reinforcements." Kryvar recognized the name from intercepted transmissions. Brandon Webb was a human soldier whose exploits had become legendary among Kytharian intelligence. The man was a symbol of the iron-blooded resilience that defined humanity's defense. He was known to charge headlong into enemy fire, rallying his comrades and turning the tide with sheer force of will. Thexolan's compound eyes flicked toward the comm panel, his mandibles tightening. They are even willing to sacrifice their own with reckless abandon. Their cohesion is a paradox, an unyielding unity forged through suffering. Kryvar exhaled a slow, measured breath. He felt the weight of command pressing down on him like the whole plating under fire. The Kytharian warlords had faced countless foes and prevailed, but the humans were different. They were not just another species to be dominated. They were a force that defied the natural order. He moved to the tactical console, fingers scraping against the cold glass as he recalibrated the assault plans. The sensors showed human positions entrenched among the jagged cliffs and ruins. Their makeshift fortifications, crafted from scavenged materials and sheer determination. The scent of scorched earth and blood seemed to seep through the data feed, painting a vivid picture of a battlefield soaked in sacrifice. Kryvar's mind raced through possibilities. Could they break the human spirit? Could the Kytharian warlords adapt their strategies to overcome this insolent species? Or was this the beginning of the end? As the command center shuddered from distant explosions, echoes of artillery barrages and aerial strikes, the commander allowed himself a moment of grim clarity. The humans fought not with technology or overwhelming force, but with an indomitable will that no weapon could shatter. Their iron-blooded resilience was a storm that threatened to consume everything the Kytharians had built. Thexolan's voice cut through the darkness again. "There is more, Commander." A transmission, unintelligible at first, captured by our long-range arrays. "It contains a message, an appeal to unknown species." Kryvar's multifaceted eyes narrowed. An appeal from the humans. It was unprecedented. The Kytharians had always relied on strength and alliances forged in power, not desperation broadcast into the void. The data arrived, a series of pulsating signals encoded in a pattern unfamiliar to Kytharian linguistics. Thexulan worked frantically to decipher the code, the patterns revealing fragments of human language, hints of their culture and their plight. The message spoke of annihilation, of betrayal by supposed allies, and of a final, desperate hope that someone, anyone, would come to their aid. The room seemed to close in around Kryvar as the realization sank in. Humanity, the species he had underestimated, was reaching out into the black sea of stars, casting a lifeline across the void. It was a gambit born of desperation, but also of hope. Kryvar felt the cold edge of doubt slice through his resolve. Could the humans call summon help? Would the Kytharian warlords face not only this relentless foe, but also unknown powers drawn by humanity's plea? The strategic landscape shifted beneath his claws like shifting sands. The battle outside raged on. A sudden tremor shook the ship. A distant explosion, perhaps a missile strike from the surface. Alerts flashed on the consoles, warning of incoming attacks, the thick hull groaning under stress. Kryvar steadied himself, forcing his racing thoughts into focus. The war was no longer a simple conquest. It was a crucible testing the very essence of the Kytharian spirit. They faced not just an enemy, but the unknown. And somewhere beyond the stars, the first revelation of what humanity truly was, iron-blooded, unyielding, was taking shape. As the Velzorath turned its prow toward the next engagement, Kryvar's eyes reflected the cold fire of determination. The warlords had always been masters of death and destruction, but this was something different. Something that could break or forge a new future. And in the shadows of uncertainty, the first revelation had come. Human resilience was a force unlike any other. It was a tempest that no warlord could ignore. The acrid scent of burning metal hung heavy in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of ionized energy, and the faint, unsettling sweetness of scorched alien flora. Kryvar crouched low behind the shattered remains of a once majestic Kytharian outpost, his multi-faceted eyes scanning the ruined battlefield. The ground beneath him was a chaotic tapestry of smoldering craters and shattered bones, remnants of a war that had shredded their world and hope alike. Above, the twin suns dipped behind jagged, blood-streaked mountains, casting long shadows that seemed to twist into grotesque shapes, silent witnesses to the carnage. Kryvar's mind raced with a turbulent mix of anguish and determination. The Kytharian warlords, once revered throughout their sector as unassailable forces, had been undone not just by humanity's raw power, but by their weaponized ingenuity, an ingenuity Kytharians had sorely underestimated. Thexulan, a scientist and a voice of reason amidst the chaos, had long warned of this, but desperation had driven the Kytharian leadership into stubborn pride and brutal tactics that only accelerated their doom. A sudden flicker of movement caught Kryvar's attention. His muscles tensed, every sensor alert. Through the jagged ruins, faint glimmers of human walkers and drones moved with eerie precision. Their metallic limbs creaked softly, each step measured, calculated. The human's armor was a patchwork of scars and fresh dents, testimony to the fierce skirmishes they had endured. Even with superior numbers, the humans never rushed blindly. They fought with a cold patience that spoke of an unyielding will. Kryvar forced himself to breathe deeply, the tightness in his throat almost choking him. He thought of Thexulan's grim predictions. Humanity's response to the Kytharian plea wasn't mere intervention. It was a reckoning, a calculated war machine rolling inexorably forward. The Kytharians' own weapons, once a symphony of elegant plasma lances and psychic disruptors, now lay silent or jammed, outmatched by human adaptations and relentless countermeasures. The battlefield was a symphony of destruction. Distant explosions punctuating the low hum of active defense grids, the crackle of energy shields failing, and the occasional, haunting moan of wounded Kytharian soldiers echoing across the desolate plains. Kryvar's heart hammered with a mixture of fear and a flicker of grudging respect. This was not the mindless slaughter he had feared. It was a brutal chess match, a contest of tactical mastery that revealed the depths of human strategy. In the midst of the chaos, Kryvar's eyes caught a sudden movement, a small squad of human soldiers, their sleek armor gleaming faintly under the dying suns, maneuvering swiftly through a collapsed structure. They moved as one, their motions synchronized, almost rehearsed, a deadly dance of precision and purpose. Among them, a figure stood out: Maria Chen, the human commander whose reputation had spread like wildfire through intercepted communications. She was a force of nature, unyielding and brilliant, a living embodiment of humanity's indomitable spirit. Kryvar's mind involuntarily examined her tactics. She exploited the terrain masterfully, using the ruins not just as cover, but as kill zones, funneling Kytharian forces into narrow corridors where their superior numbers counted for little. She combined heavy firepower with unexpected feints, her units striking with surgical precision before melting away like ghosts. The humans' adaptability was staggering. Where the Kytharians had relied on overwhelming psychic might and brute force, humans were improvising, learning, evolving in real time. The air vibrated with the thrum of pulse rifles and the sharp crack of kinetic rounds. Kryvar's squad fired back, their plasma lances arcing in brilliant blue streaks. But the humans' shields absorbed and deflected the energy with unnerving efficiency. One by one, Kryvar's comrades fell, their bodies collapsing in silent finality on the scorched earth. Yet even as the Kytharian lines crumbled, the humans pressed forward, not with reckless abandon, but with a relentless, methodical advance that spoke of unshakable resolve. Kryvar's own body ached from wounds sustained in the earlier engagements, a dull throb reminding him of his mortality. Yet he pushed onward, driven by a desperate hope to deliver one final strike, a revelation that might turn the tide. He recalled Thexolan's last transmission, a tactical innovation born from the ashes of defeat. Thexolan had devised a way to reconfigure the Kytharian energy matrix, to disrupt human technology not by brute force, but by subtle sabotage embedded deep within their electronic systems. The plan was risky, perhaps suicidal, but designed to exploit the humans' reliance on their complex machinery. Kryvar moved toward a nearby command node, a relic of Kytharian engineering, now repurposed as a makeshift weapon. The device pulsed faintly, its circuits humming with unstable power. He connected an interface probe, his claws trembling as he initiated the sequence. Around him, the battlefield seemed to slow. Explosions dimmed to muted echoes, the cries of the dying faded into distant whispers. Then, suddenly, a wave of dissonant energy rippled outward from the node, invisible but potent. Kryvar felt a shudder pass through his own armor, a feedback loop that threatened to overwhelm his senses. But the initial signs were promising. Human drones nearby flickered erratically, their systems glitching and rebooting. The pulse rifles in the distance twitched awkwardly, their operators momentarily thrown off balance. For a brief, shimmering moment, Kryvar dared to hope. The humans' own technology might be their undoing. But the moment was cruelly fleeting. From the smoke and dust, an unnatural calm descended. Kryvar's sensors registered a surge of coordinated countermeasures. Human engineers, identified only by the faint glow of their enhanced exosuits, emerged from cover like shadows in the twilight. They worked with mechanical precision, deploying electromagnetic dampeners an emergency power reroutes that neutralize the sabotage's effects. Kryvar's heart sank as the tide of battle resumed its merciless rhythm. The humans adapted again, their very willingness to evolve on the fly forging a path through every obstacle. His squad, now mere fragments of its former self, scattered in a desperate retreat as human forces closed the net. The air smelt of hot metal and charred flesh as a deafening blast erupted behind Kryvar. He turned just in time to see one of his own lie shattered, a friend lost in the relentless advance. The ground trembled beneath the weight of human walkers, massive, armored giants that stomped through the ruins with terrifying efficiency. Their cannons spat death in wide arcs, obliterating Kytharian barricades with merciless ease. Fear threatened to consume Kryvar, but he forced it down, replacing it with cold clarity. This was the second revelation. The true nature of the war had revealed itself. It was not a conflict of strength or numbers, but of mind and will. Humanity was a species that did not merely fight, they learned, adapted, and transcended their limitations at every turn. Their tactical ingenuity was a force of nature, unyielding and unstoppable. Kryvar retreated deeper into the labyrinthine wreckage, each step heavier than the last. The landscape around him was a shattered testament to a civilization on the brink. Ruined structures half swallowed by creeping alien vines, pools of iridescent acid reflecting the burning skies, and the skeletal remains of ancient beasts, long extinct but now eerily strewn across the battlefield. Yet even in this desolation, Kryvar could sense a spark. A flicker of resistance, a dead man's defiance. Somewhere beyond the immediate carnage, Thaxulan's voice echoed faintly in his mind, urging persistence, urging innovation. Humanity's war machine was formidable, yes, but history had shown that no force was truly invincible. The Kytharians had once ruled the stars through unity and wisdom. Their time was ending, but not without a fight that would be remembered. As darkness crept over the horizon, Kryvar found a moment to pause. The shattered frame of an ancient monument loomed ahead, its inscriptions long eroded, but still whispering tales of sacrifice and hope. He pressed a claw to the worn stone, feeling the vibrations of countless voices. Ancestors, warriors, scientists, calling him to stand firm. The sounds of combat faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the steady pulse of his own breath and the faint hum of the sabotage device still operating in the background. This was not the end, Kryvar reminded himself. It was the crucible in which the final revelation would be forged. Humanity's arrival had reshaped the war in ways no one could have predicted. Their tactical genius had shattered Kytharian complacency and exposed vulnerabilities long hidden beneath layers of tradition and pride. But the Kytharians, wounded and weary, were learning too. In this brutal exchange, both species revealed their true natures, their strengths and flaws laid bare beneath the dying light of distant suns. Kryvar's eyes narrowed as he rose from the rubble. The warlords had challenged humanity and lost, but the story was far from over. The final struggle, the last war, was yet to come. And in that crucible, the true essence of both species would be revealed. Not in the firing of weapons or the clash of armies. The cold void, beyond the shattered remains of the Kytharian homeworld, stretched infinitely, a vast canvas of darkness punctuated by distant, indifferent stars. Yet within the battered hull of the human cruiser Horizon's Reach, a warmth pulsed, a fierce, unrelenting flame born not of engines or reactors, but of hope and resolve. Maria Chen stood at the observation deck's expansive viewport, her sharp eyes tracing the ghostly shimmer of distant nebulae. The swirling hues of violet and emerald seemed to mock the devastation that had brought them here. The Kytharians, once vibrant and thriving, were now a flicker away from oblivion. Maria's thoughts spun like the stars outside. The Kytharian broadcast, the desperate call etched in static and raw pain, had reached Earth by chance, or perhaps by fate. and it had stirred something deep within humanity's core, a recognition, a call to rise. The third revelation was not merely about war or survival. It was about unity, about a species forging strength through unyielding togetherness. The corridors of the cruiser hummed with tense activity. Soldiers prepared for deployment, their faces hard and determined beneath the weight of imminent conflict. Brandon Webb, standing nearby, was a steel-clad silhouette against the sterile metallic walls. His breath was steady, but Maria could see the flicker of nerves in his eyes, the same flicker she recognized within herself. This was no ordinary fight. They weren't just battling an enemy, they were carrying the hopes of an entire civilization on their backs. The Kytharians had taught humanity that desperation breeds resolve. It was a lesson etched in every scarred landscape, every shattered cityscape seen through the ship's sensors. The Kytharian warlords, ruthless and unforgiving, had pressed their assault with brutal efficiency, erasing entire regions in fiery sweeps. Yet despite the apocalypse, the Kytharian people had never surrendered. Their message was clear: unity was their shield, and they would not break. Maria's mind drifted to Kythar, the alien commander whose final transmission had been a mosaic of defiance and sorrow. His gruff voice, layered with fatigue and unwavering loyalty, echoed in her memory. She imagined him standing amidst the ruins of his capital, the acrid smoke of burning forests curling into the star-lit sky. His eyes, sharp and haunted, scanning the horizon for any sign of hope. The Kytharians had been betrayed by their own allies, abandoned to the merciless tide of warlords. Yet Kythar's spirit had not wavered. If anything, it had forged itself into something stronger, more resilient. The horizon's reach shuddered slightly as it dropped out of warp, arriving in orbit around the Kytharians' last sanctuary. A planet scarred by war, its surface a chaotic tapestry of craters, smoldering ruins, and twisted metal. The atmosphere was thin, tinged with the sickly scent of burning fuel and scorched flora, seeping faintly through the ship's filtration systems. The scene was a grim reminder of the stakes. This was not a rescue mission. It was a stand, humanity's answer to a plea born in the shadow of extinction. Maria moved to the tactical console, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. The data streamed in, a grim ledger of losses and strategic choke points. The Kytharian resistance was fractured, their forces scattered and weary. Yet beneath the chaos lay a pattern of coordinated strikes, guerrilla tactics adapted from centuries of survival. Olin's scientific mind, transmitted through fragmented communiques, flashed in Maria's memory. The Kytharians were defenders of their world, masters of adaptation and resilience. The briefing room filled quickly. Faces illuminated by the bluish glow of the screens, soldiers and officers alike absorbed the grim reality. Maria's voice broke the silence, low and deliberate. This is not just about reclaiming territory. It's about honoring a species that stood unbroken in the face of annihilation. We fight because they fought. We fight because surrender is not an option. Brandon's gaze met hers, a silent exchange passing between them, a shared commitment forged in the crucible of desperation. Outside, the planet below was a battlefield carved by fire and blood, yet beneath the suit lay a promise, the indomitable will to survive. As the deployment pods detached, a low hum vibrated through the ship's frame. The atmosphere inside the pods was thick with anticipation and the sterile scent of recycled air. Maria's heart pounded in time with the countdown, each beat a drum of war and hope intertwined. The pods pierced the planet's atmosphere, the fiery descent painting streaks of orange against the dusky sky. Touchdown was jarring. The ground beneath them trembled with distant detonations, the sharp crackle of energy weapons piercing the smoky haze. The air was heavy with the acrid sting of ozone and burnt metal. Maria's boots sank slightly into the charred soil as she stepped out, the Kytharian landscape stretching before her like a war-torn tapestry. Jagged ruins rose like skeletal fingers, the remnants of cities that had once thrived in harmony. The Kytharian fighters emerged from the shadows. Lean, resolute figures clad in patchwork armor, their eyes gleaming with a fierce light. They moved with a grace born of necessity, their weapons steady and precise. Maria felt the weight of their gaze, skeptical yet hopeful. Humanity was their last beacon, an unexpected ally in a brutal fight. Together, they advanced through the shattered streets, the eerie silence punctuated by the distant echoes of battle. The ground trembled beneath the thunder of approaching warlord reinforcements. Maria's breath caught in her throat as the first salvo rained down, explosions blossoming in fiery blooms, sending shards of debris skittering across the ruined pavement. The firefight erupted with savage intensity. The sharp retort of pulse rifles mingled with the guttural cries of Kytharian war cries. Maria's senses sharpened, each flash of light, each burst of sound etched into her memory. The air was thick with the smell of burning circuitry and scorched flesh, a brutal reminder of the cost of resistance. Brandon darted forward, his movements fluid and calculated. The bond between human and Kytharian fighters forged in the heat of battle was palpable, a silent pact of survival. Maria's voice cut through the chaos, orders crisp and unwavering. "Hold the line! We are the shield for those who refuse to fall." Amidst the chaos, Maria glimpsed Thexulan, his slender form weaving through the fray, his eyes alight with a fierce determination. The scientist's presence was a balm, a symbol of knowledge wielded as a weapon. His hands moved deftly over a portable device, sending pulses of energy that disrupted enemy communications and weapon systems. The tide began to shift. The warlord forces surged, relentless and brutal. Massive mech units stomped across the battlefield, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground like earthquakes. The sky blazed with tracer fire, starships exchanging volleys in the upper atmosphere. The scene was a maelstrom of destruction and defiance, life and death intertwined. Maria's mind raced, each decision a thread in the fragile web of survival. She felt the weight of countless lives on her shoulders. The Kytharians who had endured unimaginable loss, the humans who had answered a distant call, and the fragile hope that wove them together. Hours bled into night. The battlefield was a shifting mosaic of light and shadow. Exhaustion gnawed at the edges of resolve, but surrender was a poison humanity refused to taste. As dawn's first light crept over the horizon, a new revelation settled in Maria's heart, the unyielding unity of disparate souls, bound not by blood, but by an unbreakable will. The Kytharians and humans fought not as strangers or allies by chance, but as a single force, a testament to the strength born from shared struggle. The warlords' advance faltered, their brutal momentum checked by a coalition of spirit and strategy. Maria stood amidst the rubble, her body battered but unbowed. The air was electric with the scent of rain on scorched earth, a fragile promise of renewal. She closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of life around her, the steady heartbeat of a species refusing to fade into shadow. This was the third revelation, that unity was not forged in peace alone, but in the crucible of war, that even in the darkest night, the light of hope could blaze brighter than any star. Humanity had answered the call, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The Kytharian warlords had challenged them, and for the first time in centuries, the warlords faced an enemy they could not break. Maria opened her eyes, steeling herself for the battles yet to come. The war was far from over, but the path forward was clear. Together, they would stand unyielding against the storm. Together, they would be the last war the Kytharian people ever faced. The barren plains of Veshkara stretched endlessly beneath a crimson sky, the twin suns hanging low like dying embers. Dust swirled in restless eddies, stirred by the distant rumbles of engines and the sharp crackle of energized weaponry. The air was thick with the metallic tang of scorched soil and ozone, a bitter reminder of the countless battles waged across this forsaken world. Here, amidst shattered ruins and the skeletal remains of once majestic spires, the Kytharian warlords made their final stand. Kryvar stood atop a fractured boulder, his four eyes surveying the desolation before him. His tall, sinewy frame was clad in battle-worn armor, etched with the blood-red sigils of his clan. The wind tugged at the tattered banners draped over his shoulders, the fabric whispering tales of honor and sacrifice. Around him, his warlords gathered, scarred, exhausted, yet unyielding. Each bore the weight of their lineage and the burden of an impending end. The ground trembled beneath the approaching human fleet. A constellation of colossal starships hung in the sky, their hulls gleaming with cold precision. From their bellies, mechanized legions poured forth. Soldiers clad in armor of shining ceramatal, their boots pounding like thunder on the cracked earth. The humans moved with a terrifying efficiency, their formation unbroken, their eyes set on annihilation. Kryvar's heart thundered in his chest, not from fear, but from a fierce determination. This was the moment the Kytharians had prepared for, the culmination of centuries of pride and resilience. The warlords would not fall quietly into oblivion. They would carve their legacy into the bones of their enemies. Desolation, the elder scientist whose once gleaming labs had been reduced to rubble, shuffled forward. His once pristine robes were smeared with grime, and his multiple limbs trembled with exhaustion. Yet in his eyes burned an unyielding spark. "Commander," he rasped, "the energy matrix is unstable. We can channel a final pulse. If we synchronize with the warlord core, it may cripple their advance long enough for us to strike." Kryvar nodded, absorbing the weight of Desolan's words. The energy matrix was their last hope, a relic of forgotten Kytharian technology capable of unleashing devastating force. But it demanded sacrifice, a connection that would bind several warlords together in one final act. He glanced at his comrades, reading the silent resolve etched into their faces. One by one, they stepped forward, their assent unspoken but understood. Kryvar's voice was steady, a low echo amidst the chaos. "For our people, we will choose our end." The warlords moved to the center of the ruined plaza, where the remnants of the energy core lay buried beneath cracked stone and twisted metal. Desolation crouched over the device, his multi-fingered hands deftly manipulating ancient controls. A soft hum began to rise, growing into a deep resonance that vibrated through the bones of everyone present. Kryvar took a deep breath, feeling the surge of power ripple beneath his skin as the core linked with the warlord's neural networks. Colors flared behind his eyes, shards of memory, flashes of battle, the faces of the fallen. The connection was both excruciating and exhilarating, a communion of pain and purpose. From the horizon, the first human units breached the line, their weapons coughing fire and steel. Kryvar's warriors met them with ferocity, blades clashing, energy pulses flaring in bursts of violent light. The air was filled with the scent of burnt ozone and the metallic tang of blood. Each strike was a desperate gamble, each breath a stolen moment in the face of overwhelming odds. Kryvar moved like a tempest, his multi-jointed limbs fluid and precise. His mind was clear, focused on the synergy of the energy core. Desolation's voice echoed inside his head, guiding the modulation of the pulse. The warriors around him fought with renewed vigor, their connection amplifying their strength and reflexes. The ground shook as the energy matrix reached critical levels. A low, thrumming pulse spread outward, distorting the air, sending shards of rock and debris flying. Human soldiers faltered, their armor systems overloaded by the surge. Machines sparked and stuttered, their movements jerky and disoriented. For a fleeting moment, the tide seemed to turn, but the humans adapted quickly. Commander Maria Chen's voice crackled over comms, calm and resolute. The mechanized legions adjusted their formations, deploying countermeasures and precision strikes. The battlefield became a maelstrom of smoke, fire, and shrapnel, each side locked in a deadly embrace. Kryvar felt the strain of the energy pulse clawing at his very essence. The connection was fracturing his mind, blending his consciousness with his brothers in arms. Memories and emotions interwove into a tapestry of shared purpose and sacrifice. Pain blossomed like fire behind his eyes, but he pressed on, driven by the unyielding will to protect what remained of his people. Around him, the warlords began to falter, their forms shimmering and distorting as the energy matrix taxed their bodies beyond endurance. Thex Olin's voice grew weak, a fragile thread in the cacophony of battle. Almost there, just a moment more. Suddenly, a thunderous explosion rocked the plaza. Brandon Webb, human soldier and vanguard of the assault, spearheaded a brutal charge. His armor gleamed under the twin suns, his rifle blazing a relentless storm. Kryvar caught a glimpse of him, a solitary figure amidst the chaos, pushing through the shattered remnants of the warlord defense. The warlords rallied, their shared energy igniting a final surge of strength. Kryvar launched himself at the human commander, his blade a streak of lethal intent. The air sang with the collision of metal and flesh, the shockwave sending dust and debris spiraling skyward. For a moment, the two warriors were locked in a silent dance of death. But the energy matrix reached its zenith. A blinding pulse erupted from the core, a wave of incandescent force that swept across the battlefield like a tempest unleashed. Human machines convulsed and collapsed. Soldiers were thrown to the ground, shields shattered by the overwhelming blast. Kryvar felt his body unraveling, consciousness slipping like sand through open fingers. Yet within the haze, a profound peace settled. The final act was complete. The Kytharian warlords had carved their defiance into the annals of history. As the pulse faded, silence descended like a shroud. The crimson sky darkened, stars peeking through the veil of smoke and ash. The battlefield was a graveyard of twisted metal and broken dreams, the echoes of conflict lingering like a mournful refrain. Kryvar's vision dimmed, but a distant sound stirred, a faint transmission crackling through the void. The signal was faint, yet unmistakable, the arrival of allies. Salvation kindled in the cold depths of space. Humanity had answered the desperate call. In the twilight of defeat, hope flickered anew. The warlord's sacrifice had bought the spark of redemption, a chance for the Kytharian legacy to endure beyond the last war. The acrid scent of burnt ozone lingered in the cramped command chamber of the Kytharian flagship, a ragged echo of the recent storm of plasma fire that had torn through the enemy's flagship moments before. The air shimmered faintly with residual heat, and every surface bore the scars of the battle. Scorched panels, sparking conduits, and the dull hum of systems struggling to keep the ship alive. Kryvar stood at the center of it all, his six-limbed frame rigid despite the fatigue that gnawed at his muscles and the weight of loss settling deep in his chest. Around him, the weary crew moved with robotic efficiency, their eyes hollow yet burning with an unyielding fire. The bridge's translucent viewport offered a grim panorama, the shattered remnants of the Kytharian war fleet, drifting silently among the cold stars, their twisted hulls a testament to the brutality of the conflict that had just ended. Through the haze of destruction, the distant blue and white orb of Earth shone calmly, defiantly, a beacon of life amidst the void. It was human ingenuity and courage that had turned the tide, their intervention a lifeline thrown in the final hour, when all hope seemed lost. Kryvar's mind replayed the moments before the victory, the final desperate charge, the thunderous roar of engines pushed beyond limits, the sudden flare of human gunship cannons cutting through Kytharian lines with surgical precision. Maria Chen's voice, calm yet commanding, had echoed through the comms, a lifeline amid chaos. The humans had arrived not as saviors craving tribute or glory, but as allies born from a shared commitment to survival and dignity. It was an alliance forged in the crucible of desperation and loss, more precious than any treaty inked on paper. Thexolan, the ship's chief scientist, approached silently, his multiple eyes reflecting the dim glow of the tactical displays. The scientist's usually vibrant scales were dulled, furrowed with the weight of data and the terrible cost of their losses. Yet beneath the exhaustion, there was a flicker of something new. Hope. "We must prepare the transmission," Thexolan said, voice low and steady. "Humanity's reach can extend beyond this system. If we are to rebuild, others must know of our existence and the threats we face." Kryvar nodded, eyes drifting to the console where the last message still looped the Kytharian distress beacon, a broadcast of desperation that had first reached humanity's ears. It was an admission of vulnerability that no Kytharian leader had ever dared voice before. Yet it was that same admission that had sparked a chain of events changing everything. As the ship's systems flickered uncertainly, Kryvar's thoughts turned inward. Not to the fierce battles or the losses, but to the future stretching uncertain and vast before them. Humanity, with their relentless spirit and unyielding determination, had shattered the illusion that the Kytharian were alone in the cosmos. They had reminded Kryvar what it meant to fight not for conquest or glory, but for the fragile hope of survival and coexistence. The flagship's corridors were filled with the muted murmurs of the wounded and the weary. The scent of antiseptics mingled with the faint metallic tang of blood, a harsh reminder of the physical cost of war. Kryvar moved among them, each step heavy but resolute, offering silent nods to his comrades. Their faces, alien and strange to human eyes, mirrored the same exhaustion and pain, but also a resilience born of shared hardship. Thexolan's voice brought him back to the present. "The human fleet remains in orbit, awaiting our status. Commander Chen offered support beyond what we dared hope. We must honor that promise." Kryvar turned back to the viewport, watching the constellations wheel overhead. The silence of space was deceptive. A vast emptiness that swallowed sound and light, but also a stage for renewal. The war had ended, but the struggle for survival and dignity was just beginning. The tactical displays flickered again, this time showing a small convoy of human ships descending toward the flagship's docking bay. The hum of their thrusters was barely perceptible, yet it carried a promise of aid, of friendship, of a future where the Kytharian might rise again. Kryvar's thoughts drifted to Brandon Webb, the human soldier whose steady hands and fearless courage had saved countless lives in the heat of battle. Though they had not met in person, Kryvar felt a kinship with humanity's warriors, a reflection of the shared will to endure. The docking clamps engaged with a subtle hiss, the airlock cycling with a mechanical precision that belied the tension beneath. Kryvar watched as a squadron of human marines disembarked, their armor gleaming under the harsh lights, weapons lowered but ready. Their presence was a balm to the frayed nerves of the Kytharian crew, a tangible sign that they were no longer alone. Thexolan stepped forward, gesturing toward the communications console. "The transmission must be clear and unambiguous. We cannot allow others to repeat the mistakes that led to the abandonment of our people. This message will be our declaration, and a call to any who would listen." The transmission room was a cavernous space, lined with arrays of emitters and receivers, a symphony of technology humming with potential. Kryvar settled into the operator's chair, his multifaceted eyes scanning the parameters. The message had to be perfect, a balance of warning and invitation, a testament to the devastation wrought by war and the indomitable will to survive. The message unfolded in a series of carefully crafted signals, images, and sounds filtered through universal codes, designed to transcend language barriers. Ancient Kytharian songs intertwined with holographic scenes of their verdant homeworld, now scarred but still alive. Testimonies from survivors, stories of loss and courage, pleas for understanding and alliance. As the transmission echoed into the void, Kryvar felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was more than a message. It was the genesis of a new chapter, a bridge between species forged in fire and hope. The knowledge that somewhere beyond the stars, others listened, watched, and understood was a solace that no weapon could provide. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but within the flagship's heart, a spark of light kindled, a fragile flame of unity and renewal. Kryvar allowed himself a moment to breathe, to feel the slow pulse of life returning to the ship. The human fleet's communications crackled to life again. Maria Chen's voice was calm but warm, a steady beacon amidst the static. Kryvar, your message is received. Humanity stands ready to assist in whatever capacity you require. This war may be over, but our journey together is just beginning. Kryvar responded with a solemn nod, the first true smile in cycles lighting his angular features. Then let us ensure it is a journey toward peace. The path ahead was uncertain. The Kytharian homeworld lay in ruins, their fleets decimated, and the scars of betrayal seared into their history. But in the alliance forged with humanity, there was a promise. A promise that no species would face extinction alone. As Kryvar turned from the viewport, the hum of the ship's engines deepened. Engines priming for the voyage home. The Kytharian flagship, battered but unbroken, began to move, carrying with it the hopes of a civilization reborn and the first steps of a new galactic chapter. The air grew cooler as the ship's environmental systems stabilized, carrying with it the faint scent of ionized metal and recycled oxygen. A harsh but familiar comfort. Kryvar closed his eyes briefly, recalling the peaceful forests of his youth, the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind, the chorus of unseen creatures beneath the twin suns. Those memories were now fragile relics, yet they fueled his resolve. The human crew's presence was a constant reminder that survival was not a solitary endeavor. It was a shared struggle, a collective stand against the darkness lurking in the void. The bond forged in battle transcended language, culture, and biology. A testament to the universality of life's will to endure. Brandon Webb's face flashed in Kryvar's mind, the grit in his eyes, the steady aim that had turned the tide at the critical moment. He was a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit, a spirit Kryvar now carried with him into every decision, every step forward. The comms panel blinked softly, a new message incoming. Kryvar hesitated, then activated the feed. A holographic projection flickered to life, revealing the solemn faces of representatives from several distant species. Observers who had heeded the Kytharian broadcast and now sought dialogue. The room filled with a quiet energy, the weight of possibility hanging heavy in the recycled air. Kryvar felt the first true stirrings of hope, not just for his people's survival, but for a future where cooperation could transcend conflict. He rose, steadying himself against the console, and addressed the assembled crew and visitors in a voice that resonated with newfound strength. We stand at the threshold of something greater than war, greater than loss. Together, we will rebuild what was broken. Together, we will write a new history among the stars. The words hung in the silence, a beacon of resolve in the vast darkness. Around him, the Kytharian and human crews exchanged glances, some wary, all determined. The scars of the last war would not fade overnight, but the wounds would heal with time and trust. As the flagship prepared to navigate the uncertain corridors of diplomacy and reconstruction, Kryvar allowed himself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The stars outside remained indifferent, but within the hearts of those aboard, a quiet revolution had begun. The war that had almost ended the Kytharian was the war that heralded their rebirth. The engines thrummed steadily now, propelling the ship toward home and a future forged not in blood, but in alliance. A new chapter had begun, one that would echo across galaxies and endure far beyond the final echoes of gunfire. Kryvar's multifaceted eyes lifted to the stars once more. In that infinite canvas, he saw not an ending, but a beginning. The Kytharian had been challenged, and they had chosen to rise. With humanity by their side, the cosmos no longer seemed so vast, nor the future so uncertain. The last war was over. The true journey was just beginning.